How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another Premiere Pro tutorial where today we're actually going to be going over interpreting footage and proxies. And if you don't know what a proxy is, it's pretty much taking your native video file, so that might be 4K, 1080p, HD, and it's creating a duplicate of that file, but it's dropping the resolution down quite a bit, so that way when you're editing, you can still be editing your proxy files and then export your native files. So you're editing in a lower resolution, which allows you not to drop frames and it doesn't lag out, and it pretty much allows you to edit very smoothly if you don't have a beast of an editing computer to handle the resolution and video size. So for instance, for me, when I shoot 4K, my computer can barely handle 4K, but as soon as I make a proxy file of that, 4K scrolls through so smooth, so easy that I can make cuts and I can edit that video file. So it really speeds up my editing process and flow. With that said, let's jump right into Premiere Pro and get to it. All right, guys, so we have just opened Premiere Pro, and the first thing, as you can see, is I have my footage imported, and I have one called Clip 24 and one called Clip 120. And these are referring to my frame rates of these two video clips. So you can see the 24 is 23.976 frames per second, and one is 119.88. Now this part of the tutorial is only going to apply to people who shoot in multiple frame rates. So if you're a type of person who only shoots in 23.976 frames per second, you can skip ahead because this isn't going to apply to you. But if you're like me, who shoots not only in 24 frames per second, but gets slow-mo B-roll in 120 frames per second, it's going to be important that you do this and follow along with the tutorial later when we create proxies for different frames per second video clips. So the first thing first is we're going to interpret all of our footage to our sequence frames per second settings. So as you can see, and in the last tutorial, I showed you guys how to create a sequence and put the frame rate there. I have created a sequence called Proxy Tutorial with a frame rate of 23.976 frames per second. Now, one of my clips is already in that frame rate, so we don't have to worry about that clip, but my other clip is at 119.88 frames per second. So we're gonna have to interpret that footage down to this frame rate. And how we do this is selecting the clip, right click, come down to modify and interpret footage. Now it's going to say use frame rate from file, which we don't want to do. We want to go assume this frame rate. And now you're going to set this frame rate to whatever sequence frame rate you have. So for us, it's going to be 23.976 frames per second. Can leave everything else the same and hit OK. And now we have interpreted that footage to the rest of our frame rate footage. So we are good to go for right now. So the first step into creating proxies is we're going to come up and select our clips, right click, come down to Proxy, Create Proxies. Now it's going to give you a few settings here, and for the format, you can either choose H.264 or you can choose QuickTime. I personally recommend QuickTime. And then for the preset, you can choose from a variety of presets, but we're going to actually go in and create our own preset, and I'm going to show you how to do that and the settings we're going to use. So for the time being, let's open up Adobe Media Encoder. And if you've never used this or you don't know how to go to it, come down to your search bar at the bottom and just search for Adobe Media Encoder, click it, and it'll run here. And let's wait for that to pop up. So as soon as it pops up, you're going to see a window kind of like this, and we're going to come down to the little plus arrow, click it, and we're going to create an encoding preset here. And when we do that, it's going to pop up asking us for a name, a format, yada yada. So let's do the format as QuickTime, unless you have a very specific format you're looking for. Let's go with QuickTime. Based on the preset, this isn't going to matter because we're going to go through and change the settings. So I'm going to keep it on new preset, but unless, again, you have a very specific preset you're looking for, I would just recommend leaving it on new preset because it's going to change anyway. Make sure export video and audio are checked. We're going to actually come down into video here, and for video codec, I'm going to choose GoPro Cineform because I know that some of my viewers are going to be on Mac and some are going to be on PC. And this is a good mesh between both. It works on both. It's a very nice workflow when editing proxies. I don't mind it. But once again, if you have a very specific codec that you're looking for, go ahead and choose that. For quality, since these are proxies and we don't care about the quality, I drop the quality all the way down to 1 because I'm just looking for a very smooth, easy edit workflow. Now, width and height, I'm gonna uncheck this, and it's up to you what your width and height you want it to be, but I usually go with my sequence settings. So I'm gonna go with 1920 by 1280. For frame rate, we're gonna uncheck that, and we're gonna choose the frame rate of our sequence, which is gonna be 23.976. For field order, uncheck that and go with progressive. For aspect, I go with square pixels. Once again, go through these. If you have something very specific you're looking for, one is not the right answer than the other. I choose these because this is usually what is being shot with most cameras these days. Render at maximum depth, uncheck that box, and we are good with video settings. Now let's go over to effects, where to distinguish between our proxy clips and our native file clips, we're going to do what's called an image overlay. And this is just going to be some small icon that's not going to get in your way when editing, but you're going to be able to tell when your proxies are selected and when they're not. So if we check image overlay, we go to none, we go to choose, and we find a picture or any kind of image that you think would be a nice overlay. So for me, I'm going to do my company logo, open it up, and position, I don't want it over the center because that's just going to get kind of annoying. I'll probably have OCD about that. I'm going to choose probably the top left, and I'm going to choose the size and make it small and probably go down to 50, and the opacity probably just 20. I don't really need to see it very clearly. I just need to know that, hey, that's my proxy file, that's my native file. So that is good. So make sure maximum render quality is not checked. Let's come up to preset name, and I would name this encoding, and then the frame rate, so 23.976 preset, and let's hit OK. So nice, it showed up within our user presets. So the next thing we're going to do is actually come to the plus sign and go to create ingest preset, and it's going to pop up. We're going to name this ingest, our frame rate 23.976 preset here. And we're gonna not copy files to destination, but you wanna make sure that transcode files to destination is checked. Make sure format is QuickTime or whatever format you have selected. And make sure the preset is on the preset we just created. So ours was encoding, so we are good to go there. You don't need to check any of these other boxes. And for the destination, you don't need to worry about that because that'll be switched when we actually create the proxy files anyway. So you can just leave it as it is. Let's go to OK. And now we have created our encoding and our ingest presets. So perfect. So let's go back to Premiere Pro here. Now, if we were to redo this and we were to select our clips, right click and go to Proxy, Create Proxies, and we were to come to Add Ingest Preset, we're going to need to know where that ingest preset is located. So go back to Media Encoder, right click on this ingest preset and go to Reveal Preset File. And it's going to show you the file location wherever it is on your desktop or your laptop. Just make sure that this is handy because we're going to have to come back to Premiere Pro, add ingest preset, and we're going to have to go find where that preset is located. So once you go find that, we'll continue. All right, so I found our preset, which is the ingest 23.976, and you want to make sure you are importing ingest and not encoding. So let's hit ingest, open. And because I've already done this tutorial, practiced it once or twice, it's already in there, but it should just pop up and you have now a preset here that we have just created. So this is where I told you that the file location isn't going to matter, because what we're going to do is actually create, or when we create these proxies, Adobe Premiere Pro is going to make a folder right next to our native files where it's going to place all of our proxy files in it. So make sure that next to original media and proxy folder is checked. And let's hit OK. And so it's going to start creating these proxies, and it's actually going to do this in Adobe Media Encoder. So once it starts up, we're going to actually hit stop here and then hit no. And then what you're going to do is come up, select the clip that it started, right click and go reset status. So now this is the point where I'm going to talk about where we interpreted our footage in the beginning all to the same frame rate. Now, if you're one of those people who didn't interpret any footage, you can just let this run and you are good to go. You're golden. But if you did interpret footage, what's going to happen is, though Premiere Pro interpreted that 120 frame per second footage, Adobe Media Encoder is actually not aware of that. So we're going to have to actually go in and interpret our footage again in Adobe Media Encoder. Otherwise, when we create these proxies, it's actually going to be offset from our original video clip when we're editing. So you might edit a part with your proxy video file, but then when you go back to your native, it actually edited a different part because they're offset. If that got a little confusing, don't worry. Just come up here to the video files that you have interpreted, which I know is going to be this second clip. We're going to click it, we're going to right click, and we're going to go interpret footage. And you'll see that it's still saying 120 frames per second, but we want this to be our sequence frame rate, which is 23.976. Everything else can stay the same. Hit OK. And then because we've already reset the status, so we're ready to go, other than the fact that we want to go into our folder where our native file footage is located. And you'll notice that a proxy folder has been created, like I said would happen, but we want to go in there and we want to delete what's already been created. And the reason for this is because Adobe started to create this proxy, but we stopped it. And so we don't want anything going kind of wonky when it starts recreating the proxies. So just go in there, delete it, and we've already reset the status. So now we can hit play and it's going to start creating those proxies. Once that's done, we'll actually start editing. All right, guys, so Adobe Media Encoder just finished creating the proxies. So if you were to go where your native files are, and let's go, you'll see they created a folder called Proxies. And if you go in there, you'll see our proxy file clips of our original native files. So let's go back into Premiere Pro. And now let's take our two clips here and let's put them into our timeline. So when we do this, you'll notice that I have red and yellow, and then if I were to try to play these back, especially with some effects or color grading on it, it would drop frames like crazy and it wouldn't play back. But if you notice, when I come down here below the program window and I hit this little icon called Toggle Proxies, which if you don't have, come over to the plus arrow, click it, find it, click, drag, drop, and it'll load there. But when I click this, you'll notice that, look at that, I have a icon that pops up of my proxy file. So I know this is my proxy file, and if I unclick it, it's not there. So that's my native file. So when you toggle this, that means that you're editing the proxy file. So if I were to play this file, you'll notice it plays butter smooth. There's no dropped frames or anything because this proxy file is a way lower resolution and quality, which just makes it so much easier to edit. And anytime that you want, you can just come over and unclick this, and then you're editing your native files again. Now, something I should note is that if you were to, let's say, in and out, and then you were to come up to sequence, render into out, to where you render this video sequence from your in to out points, what's going to happen is that even when you toggle proxies in to out, it's not going to show up. And the reason for that is because Adobe has already rendered this section and it's rendered it to its maximum quality. So there's no reason for your proxy files to show up. But if you were to go in and make changes and then come down and toggle proxies, they would show up. So just a little heads up in case you're wondering why your proxies aren't showing up. Double check to make sure that you haven't already rendered the videos that you're trying to look at the proxies. So I hope you guys learned something about proxies, how to use them, how to create them, and just how helpful they can be when it comes to editing higher resolution and bigger file types. I know I personally use them on any kind of edit I do where I'm using 4K or higher resolution because my computer can't handle that. And so my editing time and my editing workflow is cut in half, and it makes it so much better. I can't explain. I just recommend going in, trying it once, and just seeing the magic that it does. With that said, if you guys are looking to master Premiere Pro, maybe sequence timeline, anything else, click the link above. I have some other tutorials. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week. Peace.